What if the moment we called progress was the exact moment we stopped eating real food? There was a world before this one, before barcodes, before ingredients you couldn't pronounce, before food traveled further than your grandparents ever did. Somewhere between the steam engine and the supermarket, something fundamental changed. This is the story of how food became industrial. Not in a single moment, not with a declaration, but through a quiet revolution that rewrote what it meant to eat, to cook, to nourish. A transformation so complete, most of us never noticed we were living inside it. This story doesn't begin in a laboratory or a factory. It begins at the table, slowly, quietly, across a century. What follows is a record of how food became industrial. When food stopped being food, the Industrial Revolution you never saw coming. If you want to understand how we got here, the real story, not the one written by marketing departments, stay with us. And if this kind of investigation matters to you, subscribe. It's what keeps this work alive. The year is 1880. In most of the world, food still means what it has always meant. Bread rises in home ovens. Milk comes from a neighbor's cow, still warm, delivered in the early morning. Butter is churned by hand. Meat is butchered locally, sold the same day, cooked within hours. Preservation means salt, smoke, drying in the sun. The seasons dictate what you eat. Winter means root vegetables and stored grains. Summer means abundance and the anxiety of spoilage. Food is local not by philosophy, but by physics. There is no other option. But beneath this ancient rhythm, something is stirring. In Germany, chemists are isolating compounds. In America, railroads are stretching across impossible distances. In England, factories are learning to do in minutes what once took human hands hours. The Industrial Revolution has conquered textiles, steel, and coal. Food is next. But this won't be a revolution anyone votes for. There will be no manifesto, no declaration, just a gradual replacement, so smooth, so convenient, that by the time anyone questions it, the old world will already be a memory. What made this possible wasn't evil, it was something far more seductive: efficiency. We spend dozens of hours researching every episode of this series, uncovering what's been forgotten, connecting what's been hidden. If you value this kind of work, support it. Subscribe, leave a comment, share this story. We create the content, you keep it alive. Imagine a morning in 1870. You wake not to an alarm, but to the rhythm of necessity. A rhythm as old as the first hearth. The fire must be lit, its warmth a fragile victory over the night's chill. The bread dough, prepared the night before, sits under a cloth, alive with a slow, sour fermentation. It is ready to bake, but only if the coals are just right. If there's meat, it was killed yesterday, its preservation a race against the sun. If there's milk, it was drawn at dawn, still carrying the animal's warmth, and it must be used by noon. Every meal is a delicate daily negotiation with time and decay. You are not just a cook, you are a timekeeper, a chemist, a preserver. There is no room for error. An entire day's labor, the churning, the curing, the canning, can spoil in a single afternoon of misplaced trust in the weather. In rural France, a farmer's wife knows the exact hour butter will churn best, She knows it not by a clock, but by the feel of the cream against her wrist, by the way the morning light slants across the stone floor of the dairy. She knows the sound it makes when it's almost ready, a thick, soft slap of fat separating from buttermilk, a sound her bones recognize. The resistance of the wooden paddle changes in her hands, a subtle thickening that speaks of transformation. In an American homestead, a mother teaches her daughter to recognize the smell of grain going bad in the bin, a faint, sweet mustiness that means ruin. She shows her the grayish tinge at the edge of a cut of meat, the slight slickness that isn't due. She guides her hands in the kneading of dough until the girl learns the feeling of elasticity that means enough, a knowledge passed not in words but in the silent language of touch and result. This is not romantic, it is exhaustingly, unrelentingly intimate. Food is not yet a commodity, it is a precarious achievement. Wealth is measured in the depth of your root cellar, in the fullness of your smokehouse, in the solidity of the barrels of salt and brine that guard against the lean months. But woven into this exhausting intimacy is something profound, something we have since struggled to name. You know where your food comes from because you can see its origin. You know the farmer who sells you eggs by the set of his shoulders after a hard rain. You know the miller who grinds your wheat, his forearms dusted with a fine, eternal powder. Food has faces, names, stories etched in calluses and sunlines. A loaf of bread is not a product sealed in plastic. It is a process you understand in your muscles because your hands shaped it and your mother's hands before you in a chain of gesture and heat that stretches back into the dark of history. Recipes are not written down in precise grams and degrees. They are inherited in breaths and glances. They live in the space between instruction and instinct. Add flour until it feels right. Bake until it smells done. You'll know. And you do know, because food is not yet divorced from the body or the land. It is a continuous thread from soil to hand to hearth to mouth. You taste the summer in the jar of preserves. You smell the autumn field in the loaf. You are not a consumer. You are a participant in a cycle you can comprehend. But this world is already an echo. The rhythm of necessity is being drowned out by a new metallic heartbeat. In the swelling cities, populations are exploding. Factory whistles, not roosters, define the dawn. These new workers need to eat, but they have been pulled from the land that fed them. They have time for neither growing nor the slow, skilled work of preservation. The Industrial Revolution, in its mighty productivity, has created a paradox it now must solve. How do you feed millions of people who no longer have the time, the space, or the knowledge to feed themselves? The answer will not be found in the wisdom of farmers or the instincts of cooks. It will be drafted on engineers' blueprints, calculated in chemists' ledgers. The kitchen is no longer the heart of the home. It is about to become the destination for a new, distant industry. The transformation begins not with a bang, but with a series of quiet, pragmatic solutions to problems of distance and decay. Each one a miracle of ingenuity, each one a subtle severance. 1810. In the shadow of Napoleon's wars, a French confectioner named Nicolas Appert discovers that food sealed in glass jars and boiled doesn't spoil. He calls it appertisation. He doesn't understand why it works. The germ theory of disease is still decades away. For him, it is alchemy. The army, desperate to feed its marching men, is his first patron. For the first time, the taste of a summer pea can be captured, imprisoned in glass, and unleashed in a winter camp a continent away. Food is freed from the calendar. 1870, a German chemist, Justus von Liebig, obsessed with reducing life to its essential elements, isolates a thick, salty paste from beef. He calls it Liebig's extract of meat. Marketed as portable soup, it promises the strength of the pasture in a tin. Soldiers and explorers clutch it as a lifeline. It is a triumph of reduction, the complex, nourishing mystery of a broth distilled into a dark, glutinous slab. It is also, largely, a triumph of marketing. The promise outweighs the substance, a precedent that will define the century to come. But the true hinge point is humble. 1874, the patent for canned, sweetened, condensed milk. This is the moment milk escapes the cow. No longer a liquid tied to a creature's daily rhythm, it becomes a stable, shelf-bound commodity. It can cross oceans, sit for months in pantries, feed cities that have no pastures. It doesn't taste like fresh milk. It is thicker, sweeter, a ghost of the original. But its virtue is immortality. For the burgeoning urban millions, reliability begins to eclipse freshness as the primary virtue of food. Understand this. These are not mere inventions. They are disconnections. Every new process that conquers time and distance, canning, condensing, extracting, severs a thread. The thread between the eater and the season, between the meal and the land, between the flavor and its source. Food becomes content, to be preserved and transported. Its story simplifies to one of endurance, not origin. And in this space, this new gap between the field and the table, industry sees not just opportunity, but a new frontier. The late 1800s deliver the most profound and invisible revolution, the milling of flour. For millennia, grain was ground between stones. It was a slow, crushing embrace, leaving the oily, nutritious germ and the fibrous bran within the flour. The result was coarse, speckled, full of flavor and life, and it spoiled, as living things do, within weeks. Then, the steel roller mill. It is not a grind, but a shearing, fast, precise, and merciless. It strips away the germ and the bran, the very soul and body of the wheat, leaving only the white, starchy endosperm, pure, dead carbohydrate. The result? A flour as white as snow, able to sit in sacks for years without rancidity. It is a miracle of inertness. And it becomes a status symbol. In the 1880s, white bread is not just food, it is an emblem of purity, of modernity, of freedom from the coarse, earthy brown bread of peasants and poverty. Millers do not advertise what has been removed, the vitamins, the minerals, the fiber. They advertise the purity of what remains. By 1900, white bread is on every civilized table. And on the heels of its triumph comes a mysterious plague, beriberi, a wasting disease of the nerves and heart. In Asian nations where polished white rice becomes the staple, it reaches epidemic proportions. Doctors are baffled. They look for germs, for toxins. The truth is simpler and more damning. It is a disease of absence, a lack of thiamine, a vitamin stripped away with the husk of the rice. The very processing that made the grain eternal also made it barren. The cause would not be understood for decades while millions suffered. The body was speaking a language of deficiency that industrial science had not yet learned to hear. 1902, in a German laboratory, a deeper abstraction takes place.
Chemists Emil Fischer and Franz Hofmeister prove that proteins, the very stuff of muscle and tissue, are chains of amino acids. Life itself is reduced to a chemical architecture. This is the final necessary intellectual leap. If food is just chemistry, then it is no longer a realm for farmers and cooks alone. It is a territory for engineers. Nutrition becomes a problem of inputs and outputs. The complex, synergistic dance of compounds in a whole food can be theoretically broken down, isolated, and reassembled. Corporations take note. The plate is no longer a destination for nature's produce. It is a blank slate awaiting design.
The early 20th century is when the velocity of change shifts from machinery to mind. Technology had remade the food. Now, a new industry would remake the meaning of food. Corporations realized a profound and unsettling truth. You did not have to win on quality or nutrition. You simply had to win the story. The battle for the kitchen would be fought not with better ingredients, but with better narratives. Crafted in the nascent advertising agencies of Madison Avenue and printed in the glossy pages of women's magazines. Enter the modern food advertisement, an alchemy of aspiration, fear, and convenience. 1906, in Battle Creek, Michigan, Dr. John Harvey Kellogg, a physician obsessed with puritanical health, bowel regularity, and the suppression of sexual desire, creates a bland toasted wheat biscuit for his sanitarium patients. It is born of dogma. But his brother, W.K. Kellogg, a marketer, sees a different gospel. He adds sugar, markets it directly to the public, and seizes on the perfect slogan, the original breakfast cereal. The genius is in that word, original. It implies tradition where none exists. It frames a radical convenience, no cooking, no dishes, as a return to simple, honest virtue. Within a decade, the ritual of a hot, cooked breakfast unravels, replaced by the crunch of flakes in a bowl. It wasn't better, it was easier to sell. 1911, a more audacious invention arrives: Crisco. It begins not on a farm, but as a problem in a textile factory. What to do with the surplus of cottonseed oil, a toxic, inedible industrial byproduct? Chemistry provides the answer: hydrogenation. By blasting the oil with hydrogen atoms, it transforms from a liquid to a solid, stable, snow-white fat. Procter & Gamble now possesses a substance never before seen in nature, a purely synthetic cooking fat. But how to make a nation raised on lard and butter embrace it? They wage a campaign of breathtaking sophistication. They give away millions of free samples in sleek, modern tins. They publish free cookbooks, all Crisco recipes, teaching a generation a new way to bake. Their advertising is a masterpiece of implication. Crisco was purer because it was made in a sparkling laboratory, not in a primitive farmhouse kitchen. It was more digestible, more economical, cleaner. They positioned it not as a substitute, but as an improvement upon nature itself. The message was clear. The old ways were dirty. The new scientific way was clean. Within a generation, Crisco had replaced animal fats in millions of kitchens. The taste of pies and pastries changed. Lighter, blander, with a curiously lingering mouthfeel. A tradition of fat rendered from animals and plants known for millennia was erased by a product of chemical engineering and superior storytelling. But the true floodgate opens after World War II. The colossal industrial machine built to win the war, the canning lines that fed troops, the chemical plants that made explosives, the logistics networks that spanned the globe, turned its hungry gaze homeward. It needed a peacetime purpose. It found it in the American kitchen. Chemical companies pivoted from munitions to fertilizers and pesticides, promising endless, perfect harvests. Dehydration technology, perfected for K-rations, became the backbone of instant potatoes, powdered drinks, and soup mixes. Aluminum, produced for aircraft, now formed TV dinner trays. And corporations achieved their ultimate insight. Processed food wasn't just profitable, it was the perfect commodity. It was defensible. A tomato is fragile, seasonal, variable. A bottle of tomato ketchup is uniform, shelf-stable, and branded. You can't patent a potato, but you can patent the process for dehydrating it into perfect, uniform flakes, and you can trademark the smiling face on the box. The power shifted from the grower to the processor, from the rhythms of biology to the efficiencies of manufacturing. The 1950s, the golden age of food advertising, dawns with the television, a glowing altar in every living room. A new gospel beamed directly into the home. Modern food is better food. Swanson's TV dinner, a complete meal, no cooking required. It promised freedom, packaging the family dinner as an individual heat-and-eat experience. The shared pot gave way to the private tray. Wonder Bread, build strong bodies 12 ways. The irony was exquisite. The bread was so thoroughly stripped of nutrients in milling that it had to be enriched by spraying synthetic vitamins back onto it, a chemical apology for the natural goodness removed. Tang, marketed not on taste, but on the aura of the space race. It was the drink of astronauts, a powdered orbiter of orange flavor. Velveeta, the language itself contorted, pasteurized processed cheese product. Not cheese, a product, a legal entity. And the most potent and insidious narrative of all was woven. They made it about women's liberation. Ads in the 1960s did not say, "This food is cheaper to produce and lasts forever." They showed a stylish, smiling woman, car keys in hand, free to pursue hobbies, freed from the drudgery of the kitchen by instant cake mixes and frozen peas. More time for your family, they promised. The message was genius. Rejecting this new food was not just old-fashioned, it was anti-feminist, a betrayal of modern womanhood. The pressure to be both a perfect homemaker and a liberated individual was solved, they implied, by surrendering the stove to science. And it worked, devastatingly well. By 1970, the average American housewife spent half the time cooking her grandmother did. But in that liberated time, a profound knowledge of textures, of transformations, of the alchemy of raw into cooked was lost. The kitchen, once a center of production and craft, became a place of reheating. The meal, once a shared creation, became a purchased assembly. These truths rarely make it into mainstream conversations. The stories sold to us are powerful, and they are funded by empires. If you believe more people should understand the machinery behind their meals, share this video. One click spreads real awareness. The consequences of this great rebranding of reality were not felt in the wallet or the schedule. They were felt in the one place no advertisement could reach: the silent, accumulating biology of the body itself. By 1980, the bill for the Great Transformation had quietly arrived. It was not presented in a factory ledger or a corporate annual report, but in the arteries, the pancreases, and the waistlines of an entire population. The shift was not sudden, not a plague. It was a slow, statistical tide, visible only when you stepped back from the individual to the graph. Heart disease, once a rarity noted in medical texts with curiosity, was now the industrial world's leading killer. Obesity, a condition of extreme wealth in portraits from 1900, was now a common democratic fact. Type 2 diabetes, a disease once so linked to maturity they called it adult onset, began appearing in pediatricians' offices, in the bodies of children. And in boardrooms and newsrooms, a chorus of confusion. How could this be? We were living in an age of unparalleled abundance, of better living through chemistry. The disconnect was total. The suffering was individual, private, a source of shame. The cause was systemic, public, and brilliantly obscured. Let us be forensic. Let us place the evidence of the body beside the evidence of the diet. In 1900, the average American plate held fats from animals that grazed, butter, lard, tallow, substances our physiology had evolved alongside, whole grains, coarse breads, oatmeal, cornmeal, their fiber slowing digestion, feeding gut flora, vegetables and fruits that lived and died by the season, their nutrients peaking at harvest, meat from animals that themselves ate plants, a transfer of solar energy through biology. By 1980, the average American plate held fats from factories, margarine and vegetable oils, corn, soybean, cottonseed, extracted by chemical solvents and deodorized to be bland, molecules rearranged, unstable, inflammatory, refined carbohydrates, white bread, white rice, sugary cereals, pure, rapid glucose, spiking blood sugar like a chemical burn, engineered simulacra, frozen dinners of meat-like texture, canned soups tasting of salt and MSG, snack cakes with cream that never spoiled, foods designed for logistics, not biology, meat from animals raised in confinement, fed government-subsidized corn, their flesh altered in its very fat composition. And sugar. Not just the sugar in the bowl, but the sugar woven invisibly into the fabric of everything. In 1900, the average American consumed about 5 pounds of sugar per year, a rare luxury, a celebratory dusting. By 1980, over 120 pounds per year, 24 times more. It was in the bread to promote browning, in the salad dressing for mouthfeel, in the pasta sauce to cut acidity, in the cured meats. The body was awash in a fructose tide it had no evolutionary protocol to manage. But here is the cruel pivot, the moment the system revealed its self-perpetuating logic. When the health crises became undeniable, the industrial food complex did not retrench, it adapted. It found a new story to sell. 1977, the US government releases its first dietary guidelines for Americans. The message, distilled from contested science and powerful political lobbying, is stark and singular. Fat is the enemy. Saturated fat causes heart disease. The complex tapestry of diet, the interplay of nutrients, the role of processing, the poison of sugar, is reduced to a single, simple villain. It is a narrative gift to the food industry. If fat is the problem, then low fat is the solution. A new aisle of salvation appears in the supermarket. But flavor carried a physics problem. Fat is a carrier of taste, a giver of satisfying mouthfeel, of satiety. Remove the fat, and you are left with cardboard and water. So what did they add to make it palatable? Sugar, and more sugar, and its cheapest, most potent industrial form, high fructose corn syrup, born from the oceans of subsidized corn. It was a wizard's trick. Remove the demonized fat, add the invisible addictive sweetener, and market it as health food. The result was a catastrophic nationwide experiment. Americans, obeying the official guidance, consumed low-fat diets in record numbers. They ate more low-fat crackers, more fat-free sugary yogurts, more refined carbohydrates, and they grew fatter and sicker than ever before. The graphs for obesity and diabetes did not bend, they turned parabolic. The body was not fooled by the label. It metabolized the sugar, stored the excess as visceral fat, and descended into insulin resistance. By the year 2000, researchers put a number to the new normal. More than 60% of the average American's caloric intake came from ultra-processed foods. Substances that were not merely cooked or preserved, but deconstructed and reassembled into formulations of sugar, fat, salt, and synthetic additives. Edible products designed by food scientists to override satiety and create craving. The human body, a system honed over millennia to extract nourishment from whole plants, animals, and clean water, was now the testing ground for a post-natural food supply. It was a mismatch of epic, silent proportions. But the consequences were not merely biological. They seeped into the soul of daily life, into the architecture of family and memory. Somewhere in this great convenience, we stopped eating together. The family dinner, that daily, unremarkable sacrament of shared time and shared sustenance, became optional, then quaint. The microwave meant everyone could eat on their own schedule. The drive-thru meant no one had to face the stove. Food was demoted from ritual to fuel, a private refueling stop in the relentless day. And with that, something ancient and vital was lost: the transmission. The grandmother no longer taught the grandchild how to knead dough because the dough came frozen. The mother no longer passed down the secret to the soup because the soup came in a can. The knowledge of transformation, how heat, time, and skill turn the raw into the nourishing, was not stolen but gently made obsolete. It atrophied from disuse. Recipes passed down for generations, spattered with the grease of 100 family meals, were not thrown away. They were simply closed, placed on a high shelf, and forgotten. They became artifacts, not instructions. The chain of tactile wisdom, link by link, went silent. The body remembered its hunger for nutrients. The culture, it seemed, was forgetting its hunger for connection. The industrial plate had fed millions, but at a cost that was only beginning to be counted, not in dollars, but in health and in lost communion. The quiet shift had found its echo in the quiet isolation of the modern meal.
But the human body is not a passive ledger. It keeps its own accounts, and it protests. A dull collective unease began to stir in the early 2000s. It was a feeling in the gut, a confusion in the mind. Why, in an age of unprecedented abundance and health foods, were we sicker, heavier, more fatigued? This quiet disquiet found its voice in a handful of researchers, journalists, and renegade doctors who began asking dangerous, simple questions. Why does my food have an ingredient list that reads like a chemical patent? Why do I feel better when I eat my grandmother's cooking? When did food require quotation marks? 2006, a quiet tremor becomes a quake. Journalist Michael Pollan publishes The Omnivore's Dilemma. His premise is elegantly subversive. Follow a single meal back to its origins. Trace the industrial corn in a fast food hamburger through the labyrinth of subsidies, feedlots, and processing plants. His revelation is not of a conspiracy, but of a logic, a cold economic logic that values yield, shelf life, and profitability over nourishment. The book acts as a mirror. Millions looked at their plates and saw, for the first time, not a meal, but the endpoint of a vast, indifferent machine. And people began, haltingly, to wake up. Farmers' markets reappeared in city squares, not as museums of nostalgia, but as acts of quiet insurrection. People bought misshapen heirloom tomatoes not because they were cheaper, but because they tasted of something. They sought out eggs with deep orange yolks from chickens that scratched in the dirt, a color that spoke of a nutrient the body recognized. This was not a rejection of technology, but a reclaiming of agency. It was a choice to know the hand that grew the food. Simultaneously, the scientific edifice of the old dogma began to crack. Rigorous independent studies started to dismantle the fear of fat. The colossal mistake of the low-fat era was laid bare. It was the sugar, the refined carbohydrates, the inflammatory seed oils all along. Saturated fat, the longtime villain, was exonerated. The very oils sold as heart-healthy were revealed to be unstable, prone to oxidation, and alien to human biology. The science was finally catching up to a wisdom that had never been fully lost, only buried. The wisdom of traditional eating patterns, of whole foods, of fats your great-grandmother would have known. This awakening wasn't about a blind return to 1880. It was about applying the lens of memory and evidence to the modern world. It was about remembering that real food, an animal, a plant, a fungus, does not need a health claim on its package. Its wholeness is its credential. It was a realization that the most radical political act could be planted in a window box, chosen at a farm stand, or simmered in a pot on a Sunday afternoon. It was a rejection of the engineered helplessness that said feeding oneself was too complex, too time-consuming for the modern human. We are rebuilding the forgotten story of how food became industrial. But this work only continues if you're part of it. This is not our monologue, it's a conversation with a community that chooses to remember. Subscribe, comment your thoughts, suggest the next hidden story we should uncover. This project exists because of you. The story does not end with awakening, it begins with it. For in remembering what was taken, we also remember what we have the power to reclaim. Food is memory. It carries the history of your family, your culture, your body. The way your grandmother made soup, the smell of bread baking in a stone oven, the taste of a tomato still warm from the sun. For most of human history, food was continuous. What you ate connected you to the soil, to the seasons, to your ancestors. It was imperfect, it was labor-intensive, but it was real. The 20th century broke that continuity, not violently, quietly, through convenience, through marketing, through efficiency. And we traded memory for speed, nutrition for shelf life, connection for convenience. But here's what the architects of industrial food didn't anticipate. The body remembers. It remembers what it was designed to eat, even if the mind has forgotten. Every choice we make now, every ingredient we reject, every meal we cook from scratch, every seed we plant is a quiet rebellion. Not against progress, against erasure. Because food isn't just fuel, it's identity. And our identity was rewritten by factories. But it can be rewritten again, by us. The Hidden Plate is not a documentary about food. It's about memory, about power, about what modernity quietly changed while we weren't looking. If this story stayed with you, you're already part of this investigation. The next time you sit down to eat, ask yourself, do I know where this came from? And if the answer is no, maybe it's time to find out. Subscribe if you want to keep uncovering what was hidden. Share if you think others should see this. And leave a comment Tell us what you want us to investigate next. This work exists because you choose to remember.